Welcome to REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar today. I'm Susan Gans, and I'm your host. I'm the founder of Gans Strategic Solutions, where we operate at the intersection of business and human behavior. This show is about highlighting the journeys and organizations of leaders of small, mid-sized businesses, as well as nonprofits. We hear about their professional journeys. We hear about how they're being resilient in these very challenging times. I'm so excited for today's guest. He is Bruce Stout, and here's a little bit about Bruce. He is the CEO of the Rainmakers Forum. He began his career at Pricewaterhouse and Company, eventually becoming a senior partner of a mid-sized accounting firm. And with his extensive international tax and finance background, became a lecturer for various organizations addressing international tax shelter strategies and treaties between nations. This international experience eventually led him to advising well-known entertainers living in various countries. And this ultimately led to Bruce establishing a CPA and business management firm with offices in Beverly Hills and Manhattan. He then spent several years as CEO of a California-based entertainment company producing various programs, including an exercise video starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Bruce is the author of numerous marketing and strategic planning books and courses. He's been the spokesperson for First Transamerica Life Insurance Company, among many others, teaching accountants, attorneys, business owners, and financial services professionals how to be more effective client developers. In his current role with the Rainmakers Forum, he is a private advisor helping executives and professionals to increase their profitability and growth. He is an author, a national media person, and has served on several boards. And with that, we welcome Bruce to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on today.
You're welcome. So take us back to that journey of being a CPA and now to working with professionals on their business. Take us through that journey.
Well, it's a 40-year journey. I began with, as you mentioned, I began with Pricewaterhouse, and I was taken under the wing by a fairly well-known international tax expert, Walter Diamond, who decided that I had some skills in that area and he wanted to bring me along. He was a very famous person for the fact that during the D-Day invasions, he was the developer of what were called the Mulberry platforms, which were temporary docks that were built for D-Day. So he taught me how to learn about being an international tax advisor, doing a lot of international work with controlled foreign corporations, individuals living in other countries, that sort of thing. And so I became fairly well known for that area. And a agent in California had a client in England who was paying far too much tax for that period of time, and said, can you help in some way to reduce this problem? So I said, sure, let me talk and we'll figure this out. And so it was a world famous conductor who we decided was time to have him leave England and come to the US to become the conductor for a large symphony orchestra. And that saved a tremendous amount of money in taxes. And as a result, I began getting a reputation for knowing how to help people put more money into their pockets net of tax. So I began getting a lot of clients referred to me, and I decided, well, I can now expand my services to them. So I became a business manager for people in the movie business, music business, and TV, and also authors, and working with them in terms of guiding their careers, both from a financial standpoint and also an advisory standpoint. And from there, I always kept that practice going because that was where I was sure income was going to come in. which would allow me to test out other things. So I was approached by a group of producers who came to me and said, "We'd like you to become CEO of a new production company we're forming." So I said, "Well, why me? Because honestly, I don't know the first thing about running a production company." And they said, "Yes, but you know where the money is." So, so I thought, okay, now I get it. They're looking for me to help them to finance projects. So I said, sure, why not? Let's give it a whirl. And I learned an awful lot about running a production company, and we began developing movies for TV and direct to video, that sort of thing. And while that was going on, I always had my hands in a lot of other things. So I then became a talk show personality in the LA market, doing a show called Preferred Lifestyles. I put my hand into a little bit of record production. I was working with a group that was a one-hit wonder and helping to produce their next album, and also producing things like jewelry commercials and that sort of thing. So I was involved in a lot of different things. And so at that point, I was in the middle of shooting a jewelry commercial where I was actually asked, in addition to putting up the money for the commercial, to be one of the hand models for it, which was kind of strange. I had never thought about that as a career. So I did that, and then when we broke, I went to get a flu shot because I thought I've got to stay healthy. I've got all these balls up in the air. And the next day, I had a really bad cold coming on, and I was bedridden, and I had all my files around me in bed trying to do what I needed to do, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And then I started getting a lot of joint pain, and then I couldn't remember anything,
Okay.
and went to a series of doctors who told me that it was psychological, and that perhaps I should seek help for that, which made it far worse for me because I knew that I was suffering. And so what happened was finally I connected with a doctor who was a specialist in diseases, and he did some testing, and he said, you've got Epstein-Barr virus, which is now known as chronic fatigue syndrome. And that at least put a name to what was going on with me. But the problem was that I had no energy. It was like having mononucleosis on steroids. I couldn't do anything. And this went on for several years. So my career was in a total standstill at that point. I couldn't do anything. When I finally recovered from that after a few years, I thought to myself, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I'm approaching 40, and I don't want to go back into the same pressure cooker that I was in, because that's just going to bring back this disease. It's a stress-related illness.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, what do I really know how to do? Well, I know how to build a professional practice. So I started writing books on things like From Technician to Rainmaker, which was a book for accountants on how they can build their practice. And I was not satisfied just developing these programs, but I wanted to make some money too. And so I thought, well, here's a good idea. I can now go to insurance companies and give them an interesting model. What I can do is I can say to them, why don't you allow me to become your spokesperson, and I'll go out and I'll teach accounting firms and law firms and insurance agents how they can build their business. And the quid pro quo of that will be that they'll refer you their life insurance cases. So I went out on the stump, knocking on doors, calling and getting lots and lots of no's. Began to think, maybe this isn't such a great idea. Maybe this isn't going to work. Until Transamerica came along and said, that's a great idea. Let's try that and see if we can make it work. So I then launched a program for them, and it was a raging success. They were getting a lot of business from that. And also, while I was doing that, I was getting insurance agencies and accounting firms and law firms saying to me, can you also advise us beyond this? Can you become our advisor? So I was now engaging them as clients. So I thought, okay, this is great, but I'd like to get more of these. How do I do that? So I began looking at business networks, and there were a lot of them out there. And the problem with them was that the likelihood of getting a client that was going to pay the kind of fees that I was interested in. It was not likely to happen with a business network where there were people that were selling Venetian blinds and selling, small accounting clients, things like that. So I decided time to form my own. So I formed a business network called the Rainmakers Forum, which was with very high-level partners in accounting firms, law firms, consulting firms, and so that took off. And ultimately, that morphed into becoming a model for advisory services for these same people and helping them to build their practice. So that became a very successful business. And while I was doing that, as long as I knew that I had that predictable cash flow, I was also helping to start other businesses. I started a tech security company and several other companies at that time. And so with all of that, years went by and Hurricane Sandy hit, and we were in a shelter for a period of time. And then shortly after that, a few blizzards hit. And my wife and I decided, maybe it's time to make a change. So we moved down to Florida. We moved down to an area called Bradenton, which is between Tampa and Sarasota. And while we did that, I was still running my business in New York, and I commute back and forth a week, a month, that sort of thing. And I decided, well, maybe I can also do some mentoring for companies down here. So I joined an organization called SCORE. And SCORE is a organization of retired and semi-retired executives that mentor business owners. And so I thought, well, that's a nice path to take. I can pay it forward. And then the executive committee, SCORE, the local chapter, the Manatee chapter of SCORE said, with your production background, we'd like you to play a bigger role in what we're doing. We'd like to, move into the video world. So I said, okay, let me think about that. And I came back with an idea to create a organizational program for them called SCORE Business TV, which became a talk show. We would teach people how to build their business on this show. So while that was going on, the production facilities that we used here in Sarasota came to me and said, we're looking for somebody as an exec producer to help us build our business. And I said, that's great, but frankly, I'm not interested in becoming your employee. But I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll reverse that. I'll hire you to provide services, and I'll build my own production company. So I did that, and that's called the Talk Show Factory. And so with that, what happened was that I realized that the direction that businesses were going, that with all of social media now and all of the requirement for video, for websites and all that, I created an interesting model that nobody thought of, or nobody perhaps had the way to do that. I thought, well, if you can put together practice development and business development strategies along with the supporting video programs that can now create awareness for those people, that's a model, that's a business model. So what I did was create two new networks, one called the Experts PR Network, and another called the Global Professionals PR Network, which the members are professionals and consultants, where we do two things. One is that, well, three things. We network them, but we also provide them with strategic planning, consulting about building their businesses, and we provide them with video support. So we'll do things like video newsletters and FAQs and special reports in video and material for their websites and that sort of thing. So that became a model that, we're using now, and with some success. So that's my story.
And what a story. Who would have thought that this accountant would grow up to be this production mogul?
Had no idea where it was going, but it's been a fun ride. It really has, even with the hiccup in the middle, which was a humbling experience. And now at this stage of my life, it's okay. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it. That's a lot of fun to do. And getting into the studio and being on set and directing and doing all that, it's a lot of fun.
I can imagine. Tell us about self-care because had to learn that. I would imagine you learned that lesson in a big way. So, what can you share about what you do for self-care and the importance of it?
I went on a search looking for ways to find some inner peace and also to remove myself from daily stress, at least to manage it better. And I knew that if I could manage my stress, I could also manage my health and also keep my immune system strong. So I went on a search and I looked at all sorts of things. I knew that, for example, Wayne Dyer, who is a hero of mine, was working with an Indian teacher to help him to learn manifestation techniques and stress reduction. So I began using the same teacher to help me to learn things like TM and a form of meditation called japa. I was also looking at other organizations. I looked at a Japanese organization called Tsukio Marikari, which is not a well-known one, and that was about finding inner balance and peace as well. And I've now been meditating various forms of meditation. I also teach meditation for, oh gosh, I guess about 25 years now. It's always a balance because what will happen is that, you'll find yourself getting stressed with a lot of things coming at you, like right now, what's going on with the pandemic. And then, you forget for a bit that, well, what you were doing was helping. So then I find myself thinking, well, I haven't done meditation for 30 days. I really need to get back into it. So it's that process of, you step away from it, you go back, you step away from it, you go back. When I'm there doing it, I feel much more peaceful and I'm certainly healthier when I'm doing that. And so that becomes self-care.
So, talk to us about resiliency because you're certainly the epitome of resiliency, having to pick yourself up after having that health issue really come to the fore and where you couldn't do things for a couple of years. How did you reorient yourself and get back into it? What was that whole resiliency process like?
That was a gradual process. It started with initially when I was with the Epstein-Barr virus, I would try to restart my career again, and then after a very short period of time, I'd have a relapse, and so then I would be back to the same thing again, and that went on for about a year. Finally, I was able to figure this out that there was a certain amount of energy I could put out, and then I needed to pull back a little bit. So the 70-hour weeks I was used to now had to be 30-hour weeks. And so you adjust. So when that happens, you begin to look at, what are the really important things? So part of that process was to come up with a model saying that if I work half the amount of time, how can I double my income? What are the processes that will allow me to do that? And I began isolating those things that would generate that kind of income. And one of those was being a corporate spokesperson for a large company. And so that worked. And then gradually what you wind up doing is learning the pace that you can keep. And even so, every once in a while, for example, if I'm doing a lot of traveling, which is very tiring, I'll actually have a day or two where I just go into kind of a crash mode for a couple of days and then I reemerge. So it's a lifelong thing. That's a viral infection and it stays with you. It's a management process for that. So it's really about how do you evaluate what's really important to you. And for me, for that, it's family first, and then it's career secondarily. And if you're going to have the career, you need to figure out how can you maximize your earnings within a certain amount of time. And that's what I've worked on for many years now.
That's so motivating, right? And also real to say there's no magic bullet, right?
Right.
And that it is a process and there's times where like, whoa, I have to pull back and figure out how to manage and how can I optimize my time and efficiency and be present for first family and then career.
Right. And part of that is reinvention. I work with a lot of people now that find themselves either stalled in their career or having gone through some life-changing event. Could be divorce, could be illness, something like that. And because I've gone through this reinvention process, I've learned an awful lot about that and how you can help other people to do the same thing. And honestly, that's where I get my largest rewards is working with people like that. So I've become a mentor for people that go through those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And that brings me to a question about empowerment. So, how do you empower others and also yourself?
You can't empower anybody else, in my opinion. They have to empower themselves. Empowering myself is a matter of visualization and putting together a listing of the things that are really giving me blessings and reinforcing those and comparing those to the difficulties in life we all have. And always the blessings outweigh the difficulties. And that's a way of my empowering me. For other people, all I can do is to guide them to processes where they can begin to empower themselves. And so I'll teach things like visualization. I have a process called theater of the mind, which is a hypnotic approach to becoming able to visualize what they really want and then developing a pathway to actually get those things. So that's an empowerment process, but it's got to come from within. It doesn't come from without.
Absolutely. And you talk about being a mentor to other people's and having other people, and you talked about having a sponsor advocate early on in your career. Who have been your mentor? What types of mentors and sponsors have you had throughout your career?
Well, certainly Walter Diamond was one. As I mentioned, he was the guru with the mulberry things. Um, there was a senior partner at Price Waterhouse who I went to and I said, someday I'd like to be like you. Tell me how I can do that. Guide me through that. I've had mentors that are people that have gone through really difficult times in their lives and come out the other side. One particular mentor, when I was at my lowest, when I was in the throes of the Epstein-Barr virus and I was depressed and I couldn't even think, an angel came into my life. Somebody that had gone through a similar experience and had come out the other end, and was able to really keep me going and give me some direction. I think what happens is when the need arises, the teacher arrives. So, various times in my life, I've had that, where somebody will come along and I need them in my life at that moment. And there they are. They magically appear.
That's fantastic. I guess that's something you might have manifested to happen.
Very well may be.
Right. And sometimes I find that people have a hard time being vulnerable and saying that they need help. So, what can you say to our audience in terms of reaching out and needing help during these particularly challenging times?
I think that at least I can speak for men and say that showing vulnerability, we were brought up as children, many of us, that showing vulnerability was showing a lack of strength. And so you don't show that. It was, my growing up in the early years was big, men don't cry. And that was a lot of the programming that we had. Um, I think that's changing now. And I think that people are looking for authenticity. Hiding your problems, hiding what's going on with you doesn't help anybody. And I have great faith in people that if you're honest with them and say, I'm going through this and I could use a little help, people rise to the occasion. It's really surprising. And if you ask for help, people will be there for you. So what I've learned is, be authentic, be vulnerable. I mean, going through the things I went through was a very humbling experience. And that vulnerability scared me a bit. And I kept on hearing that voice in the back of my head, men don't cry. But, I finally learned how to do that. I also I did a lot of work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, dealing with how do you deal with these vulnerabilities and authenticity, and how do you actually come out and talk about what's going on with you. And then if you have the faith in that, then you see that people will really react to that in a wonderful way. And that's what I've learned.
That's terrific. So, in wrapping up, what would you like people to remember about our conversation today?
I think what I'd really like them to remember is we're all going through a difficult time. It's a challenging time. It's time to think about reinventing in a way to adjust to this new world we're all going into that we're not even clear what it is yet, but that there's clearly blue sky on the other side of this, and that if you're authentic, vulnerable, and you seek help and you recognize that the old rules will no longer apply, you'll be fine. And then that's what I want people to remember about this conversation.
So, I'm going to repeat what you had just said around being authentic, vulnerable, and seeking help and not being afraid to do that as ways of navigating through these uncharted waters, I would say.
Mm.
So, Bruce, how can people find you? Because we want them to find you.
Well, the easiest way is to email me at bstout, that's BSTOUT, at rainmakersforum.com. That's RAINMAKERS forum.com. Or they can call me 917-744-8375.
So I'm going to repeat this. So you can contact Bruce at bstout, STOUT, at rainmakersforum.com, or his phone number is 917-744-8375. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your insights today. We so appreciate it. And to the audience, thank you so much for watching, and be inspired to be authentic and vulnerable. And it's okay to ask for help. Until our next conversation.